Please welcome Rob Nelson.
I am really excited to be here today and talk to you guys. You're not the demographic I usually talk to, like Kier said. I'm usually talking to middle school kids or high school or college age students and trying to get them excited about science. And so this is, a real thrill to be able to talk to you guys, partly because I started out doing research in fields kind of like you, not Forest Service. I worked 4 years at the beginning of my career with the Army Corps of Engineers doing aquatic plant research, looking at invasive species and stuff, and I worked with the Bureau of Land Management doing salmon research, and I worked with NOAA in Hawaii when I was there. So, I feel like I know what's going on a little bit. But now, I do Untamed Science. I do a lot of different videos. I consider myself a scientist still, but I like to tell a lot of stories, so it's scientists that tell stories. I'm hoping that by the end of today, or this talk, that you'll have a greater appreciation for the need to communicate science in an effective way. I'm not going to try to convince everybody to do things like I do, but just understanding the role that it plays and the need for it in science, I think, is really important. I usually have people raise their hands if they've seen our videos. I'm not going to do that for fear that nobody will raise their hand. So I'm going to just show you a 1-minute teaser trailer that we have on our website so you can get a feel for the kinds of videos that we do and the style that we like to present science in.
A lot of people ask us what Untamed Science is.
That's gonna be tough.
It's gonna be great!
It's,
This is Untamed Science.
I love the deep sea.
We're going to try to answer the question, when is acceleration the greatest in skydiving?
But we're not just a bunch of adventurers, we're also scientists and filmmakers.
So we pick a topic and then we show the practical application of that out in the wild.
Wall clouds forming. We're gonna get a tornado.
get out of here! Get out! Get out! Get out of here!
It looks steep.
This is no ordinary afternoon ride.
I'm already starting to lose track of how many days we've been riding.
So if you like what we're doing, subscribe to our channel.
We're heading to Africa.
And we're trying to put you guys as scientists in a really good light and make it something that's very appealing. I don't know if you guys had middle school science videos when you were growing up. My feel is that most of the people in my generation and up, those videos were kind of boring. And we're trying to change all of that a little bit. I go into schools and I ask the kids to draw a picture of what a scientist looks like. And most of the time, it's an old white dude with, a lot of times crazy hair, lab coats, maybe holding a test tube or something. No offense to anybody who does that, by the way. But I have yet to come across somebody who draws a picture of maybe what I look like when I go out into the field, or like this. This is Lindsay Zano, the paleontologist at the museum in Raleigh. I think the day is coming. It's not quite there yet, but when it comes, I'll switch the way I do things and try to work on something else. And I say that because I think you probably are all aware that the public does have a perception of what a scientist is and what a scientist does, and maybe that's not, the reality of it. And we probably all have wanted to change that to some degree, right? However, we as scientists, I feel, also have a perception of what other scientists should be doing. And maybe that's a problem, maybe it's not a problem. For instance, I found that a lot of times scientists feel that every other researcher should be writing grants, doing research, and publishing. And if they're not doing that, then somehow they're less of a scientist because of it. I know personally, because my affinity for video, I feel like I was fighting a lot against that in grad school. And the publications come in the form of things like my master's thesis. 4 years in the making. I studied the relationship between the Hawaiian shrimp goby and the little alpheid shrimp that live in their holes. It's really fascinating. If you were to read my document, I could convince you of that. 120 pages. Trust me, it's awesome. The video that I did is much better, though. I actually went back to Hawaii a few years ago, and I wanted to show my mom my thesis, and we checked it out of the library, and there was only 5 people who had checked out my thesis. 3 of which were the same person. I don't know why. And 1 was me showing my mom. So much for reach in that. But now I do kind of similar things. I work with a lot of scientists like yourself to write grants, usually broader impacts type things. I do research for all the videos that I do. They're all different. And now when I publicize things, I publish it on our website, either video form or a web document that we put out on social media and stuff like that. I know why everybody's here, or at least I got the gist of it. Partly it's because you're scientists who do really important research. And what I'm talking about, though, is how do you convince everybody else that the research that you're doing is also really important? Because, I mean, obviously you guys have jobs, maybe it's secure, you don't have to worry about it quite as much as I do, but I'm always in the business of telling people that what we do is important, and I think that scientists need to pick that up just a little bit more. This is a little bit of a rhetorical question, but where's the balance that you have right now in using communication as a tool for your science? I'm not going to point any fingers, and you don't have to do all of these, but Twitter is a great tool, Facebook, YouTube. Maybe you're going out and writing articles for popular publications. Maybe you're working with the media, you're inviting them to come into your labs, and you're having them tell your stories, but you're acting as a vector. All of those things, obviously really important. So today I'm going to talk about the basics, just kind of get you up to speed with some of what science communication is all about. In particular, I do video, so I'm going to kind of take it from that angle. And because of that, and I'm going to be giving you guys some philosophical advice. I feel like it's important for you to understand a little bit of my story, my passions, the journey that's led me to want to be communicating science in general, because I think there's some lessons that can be learned from it, and it's fun, because it's morning time. Everybody can eat their breakfast while they show some videos. Okay, so when I grew up, I don't know if you guys did this as well when you were growing up, but your parents brought the video camera to every single sporting event you did. I'm number 21, by the way, if you want to look for it. And so basketball games, baseball games, soccer games, debates, everything was filmed, and we were then able to watch it later and kind of see what we learned. And I guess the take home for me now is that I realized that I learned from my parents that videos were a tool. They were part of your everyday life. They're part of how you communicate. Now, it wasn't just, I always miss this. It wasn't just basketball games. We also did every holiday. And not only that, but I was required to talk about it afterwards.
You gonna say something? Why not?
That's me.
Number 1, what did you get for Christmas, Robbie? Come on, tell us. I'm not going to.
And then my dad would continue to blog about it.
Oh, hi. One of the problems about photography, trying to film your own Christmas celebration, is that the cameraman never gets into the picture. That's why I'm sitting here today. But I thought I would show and share with you what it's like to give the camera to someone else, a beginner no less.
And my dad would then continue and talk about how terrible my mom's videography was, and it never seemed to get better after like 15 years of this. But I think what I learned from my dad is that...
Here's one of the richest gold deposits in all the state of Colorado. We'd also like to unleash some of the secrets of the Rockies. Those secrets, of course, are how to sell Dexport contracts.
So my dad was not a videographer by trade. He was a businessman. He worked for Digital Incorporated at the time, and it sold deck support contracts. But he used the video to try to excite his sales force to get them to sell more. And I was part of a lot of these videos growing up, and I think I owe a lot to my dad, because subconsciously he taught me, the next generation, how important this tool was in my ability to communicate whatever it was that I wanted. And the first time I remember actually taking a video myself to use as a tool was in 1989, Invention Convention, which I won, by the way.
Have you ever been in a big race on a hot day? Did you need some water to quench your thirst? Well, were you almost at the drink stand when someone knocked over all the water and left you with none? There's no reason this has to happen to you. Thirsty Jogger is the answer for you, and it's our way to make you a winner. Thirsty Jogger is a convenient way to stay cool. It provides you the needed refreshments when you want them, and it also serves as an ideal ice pack in case of an emergency. For only $17.95, you can be a winner. Be the first on your block to own your personal Thirsty Jogger, and you'll bring home the blue ribbon.
I'm sure you see what that invention is, of course. Before you start thinking that I'm independently rich because of this invention, I was not a lawyer at the time. I did not know you needed to patent these sort of things. So, of course, I was surprised a couple of years later when these things started hitting the market. So, shoot myself for not doing that. That was brilliant. Anyways, my videos continued in high school. They resembled more like this. Basically, James Bond, probably the most awkward James Bond ever. A little bit embarrassed that this video still exists, but the point is that I was being influenced by media of all sorts. At this time, I wanted to be a superhero or something. Probably my most influential person, in the sciences was this guy, Jacques Cousteau. I loved the way he represented the underwater world. For me, it was kind of a first to see it in that way. And, I lived in Dallas, Texas. I was not anywhere near the ocean, but it was because of his videos that I decided I wanted to go out and become a marine biologist. I went to the University of Miami, and then I went to Australia, and I went to Hawaii, got a graduate degree in behavioral and population ecology. When I was there, I realized that really I was kind of addicted to telling stories. This is my ornithology class. Every class, I would actually take my laptop and I would type up the notes into a web page, give them to my fellow students, publish it online so that everybody else could see it. And what I realized is when I put it out online, not only were my classmates benefiting from it, but everybody else was enjoying watching it as well. And the feedback was just really encouraging because, it was people from all over the world. As part of my study of shrimp gobies, because they're highly influenced by humans being in the water, the behavior changes, I would set up remote video cameras and film the fish, and so I had to get a whole bunch of video equipment for it. I would then take on the side and film all of my other graduate student friends, their research, and I made maybe 20 video presentations for them, and I started to be known not as the shrimp goby guy, but as the video guy. And that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that part of it, and I think I enjoyed it more than crunching the numbers and counting tail flicks of fish. And then I launched my career in 2003 when I went to Mexico. Basically a Jacques Cousteau style expedition. I took 6 graduate student friends in a 1976 Chevy van, and we put 7,000 miles on it going throughout Mexico. It was awesome. I wouldn't do that today, probably. It's a little bit dangerous, but it was fun at the time. And what I realized is that I was kind of, at that point, leading in Jacques Cousteau's footsteps in that he was a filmmaker, he was an explorer, but he wasn't really the marine biologist that I was studying to be. So I decided I was going to switch gears a little bit, and I found out that there was a program in Montana, in Bozeman. Montana State University has a program in science and natural history of filmmaking. It's one of the only places that you can get a degree like that, and I was stoked, so I went up there. And at the same time, I started a website called The Wild Classroom, and all of the videos that I would make as part of my studies, I put online for free for students and teachers, because I came from teaching undergraduate lab classes, and I found a real need for that. It was no YouTube at the time. And people started to get really excited about it. They liked it. And so what happened was Pearson Publishing, who made this biology textbook, they approached me and they said, Rob, when we make our new biology textbook, we want you to replace the Discovery Channel, whose videos are somewhat boring, to be honest. Because you have a fun style, we think kids would really like it. I said, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. So for this new biology textbook, I don't know if you guys have, do anybody have kids? If they're bringing on this textbook, then we have videos in there. Actually, we did their high school biology, we did all their middle school, we did all their elementary school. In total, we did 400 videos for all their textbooks. So to some degree, we're having an influence on kids all around the country, whether they know it or not. I mean, a lot of them associate that with school stuff, and it's kind of boring. Actually, I had somebody who just was in college, and I asked her for feedback on her videos, and she's like, well, your videos are a little old school. It's like stuff you might see in a school classroom. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, well, that's because I'm making those videos. I'm getting older, I guess. But, and so that helped launch what we're doing. Now we do everything under the name Untamed Science since about 2007, actually. And we're putting things online. We have a YouTube channel. If you have homeschooled kids or something, it is a great resource. And we're working with scientists. The best part of my job is to work with researchers, scientists just like yourself, and tell the story of the research that they're doing. I kind of want to fill you guys in now on some advice. Some really good advice that I got when I was in high school. That's my uncle over there on this side, the green, and I'm in the red there. He said, Rob, I think the most important thing in being successful is that you do two things well. Now you have to understand, had a PhD in geology, and he was also a businessman, and when you mix oil into there, it's a good recipe for success. I don't know if at the time I necessarily realized what two things I might want to be good at, or if I even realized that was good advice, but looking back now, I have my background in biology, I have my background in filmmaking. I'm not the best at either one of those fields, but when you put them together, it is really important. And I think part of what allows me to do what I'm doing. Now, all of you, of course, are really good at research. You're really good at the science. If you were to step back a little bit and try to pull a little bit of the science communication, it could do really a lot of wonders. Again, I'm not trying to convince anybody to do my role. I need a job too. But so this is a question I want you to think about. Do we want change in the world to happen based on the research we're finding, based on the studies and science? And I'm sure everybody's going to say yes. Now, to me, one of the most important things is biodiversity. I studied fish. A lot of my friends were doing fisheries stuff. Biodiversity in the aquatic realm has a lot to do with protecting habitat, protecting things from being overfished. Now, if the only thing that we have to convince anybody are our publications in scientific documents, then I think we're in trouble. This is a little clip that I put together a couple years ago. If we use video, something rich and something that can convince people, I think maybe we have a standing chance. Now, if you think about how do we convince anybody of making any change? Well, I think there's a couple ways. One is we convince almost all of the public to, say, not overfish a particular stock. That's somewhat difficult because it only takes a few with a big boat to go out and do it. Or you convince enough of the public that they can put pressure on politicians, or you can go right to the politicians, right? And so I want to tell you a story on the latter. This is the Hawaiian island chain. Hope a lot of you have already been there. It's beautiful. Down there to the right, stuff that's not highlighted in blue, those are the islands that everybody visits. The big island is the big one on the bottom right. Honolulu is up there. That's where I did all my research, actually on the backside in Kaneohe Bay. And then everything highlighted in blue is the Northwest Hawaiian island chain. And basically nobody goes there. It's just a bunch of atolls, a bunch of little island pinnacles and stuff. But there's lots of fish, there's lots of biodiversity. Scientists have always wanted to protect that area. Fishermen have always wanted to fish it. And so it was kind of a back and forth. So in 2005, Jean-Michel Cousteau decided to do a whole series in his Ocean Adventures series with PBS. One of them was called the Journey to Curie. Curie's the last atoll up on the island chain. And he was able to present that video at a special screening to then President George Bush with a bunch of other ocean advocates, and he was very inspired by the videos that he saw and the conversations that he had, that only 2 months later, he signed legislation that created a 139,000 square mile protected marine national monument. That's the name if you want to try to mentally say that. It's not so easy, but it was a huge win for conservationists. It was a huge win for all of my friends who were scientists because that's what everybody wanted. And I was not in the president's head. I don't know how much of an influence the video was, but knowing how emotional of a response videos can create, I think probably it had a huge impact. And maybe without it, you wouldn't have this National Marine Monument. So I love that story. Now, how do we convince anybody of being excited about the things that we love, right? I put this up here because it's not a scientific document, of course. It's something I found in the self-help section of the bookstore in grad school when I didn't have a girlfriend. And I was like, that sounds like the book I need. But it's actually, inside of it, there's 100 tips and tricks to make anybody fall in love with you. And it's really not a whole bunch of tricks. It should probably be titled, How to Not Screw It Up If You Find the Right Person. Because none of us really know how to communicate all that well until we're taught about it. For instance, I want to show you this one because it's kind of cool. It's all based on science. Did you know that if on a first date, they did scientific studies on this, you were to go across something scary, like a scary bridge, then it's something about the hormones, I guess, I don't know, but you're more likely to be attracted to that person than if you were to say, do something like just go out to eat or go watch a movie or something. So, I'm guessing everybody here is not in this situation that I was, but it's interesting. I did, by the way, take my now wife skydiving on our first date because of that. It worked. But the point is, we don't have a lot of self-help sections full of books as scientists to teach us how to communicate what we're passionate about to get everybody else excited at the same time. There are a few out there, and if you're interested, I could probably point you in the right direction for those few resources. But that's partly why I spend a lot of time trying to communicate the need to do science communication. Because I was sick for this whole week, I put a couple of videos in here for you guys to enjoy, wake up in the morning, and give my voice a chance to rest. I want to show you how I communicate on a very simple level. This is a vlog style video I'm going to show. It's actually 7 minutes long, so it'll allow you to sit back. I asked some important questions, I think, about media. And instead of me telling you, I thought, since I'm talking about videos, why don't I have the video tell you? And then we can talk about it afterwards. Also, the one thing that I want you to get out of this is I'm just holding the camera in front of me, and hopefully at the end you can be like, I could do that. I could hold the camera out, and I could do something just like that. So here we go.
Jonas and I are going on this little kayak trip. Here's a question for you. Do we as documentary filmmakers have a responsibility to tell the truth? Of course, you might think, of course, that's a silly question. I don't think it's as simple as you're either friggin' lying or you're telling the truth when you're doing a documentary, because there's lots of lines in between. I like to look at it something like this. The whole gradient from super factual all the way to you just made up stuff, and things fall in between. You ready?
I think I am. Finally.
Are you stressed?
I was stressed.
The reason for me wanting to talk about this is we went to a conference and a panel stood up in front of us. It was composed of people from all the different networks, and they asked this same question, do we have a responsibility to tell the truth, teach people science? And everybody more or less said, yeah, it's part of our mission, until the representative from Discovery Channel stood up and said, no, we want to make what people want to watch. And this is what they showed.
Aliens and the military. The list of global threats to the human race is long. But could Earth's armed forces be facing a new enemy that is literally out of this world?
We have only to open our eyes to see how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
To me, the most interesting thing about that clip is that while it didn't lie and say there were aliens, it raised a bunch of questions that basically made it sound like there could be aliens. So in my mind, while it's not lying, it falls somewhere in the middle, and that might be just not giving the full truth. And of course, all of us in the stands, we're science communicators. Our whole role is to try to tell people the truth, to try to communicate science as best we can, and I feel that maybe these documentaries are hurting the public by making people believe that maybe some of these things exist when they don't.
Actually, I don't want to sound weak. My back is totally fine.
Time for lunch. I'm going to present a couple of the popular shows that have come out recently, just to get you to think where it might fall along the scale. But first, we got to jump in.
Whoa! We got to dip
Whoa! Oh, I'm going numb though now.
This is Ulva.
I like this first show. It's appropriate for what we're doing right at the moment. Mermaids, body found.
Oh my God! What is that?
Did you get that shot? Oh my God.
In 2004, two boys were the first to arrive on a mass whale beaching in Washington State. They captured it on a cell phone. The boys claim they saw something that day. They claim they saw a body.
So clearly, Mermaids is a fake documentary. I mean, most people probably know that mermaids don't exist. But According to the lady from NOAA that I talked to, she said they got a flood of phone calls from people wanting to know if mermaids do actually exist. I don't know where the public would get that idea. I mean, it was an interesting documentary, but it definitely doesn't lie on the completely terrible lie end of the scale. Oh, look at this. I gotta do a quick time lapse, hold on. Now take the documentary Voodoo Sharks, a little show on Shark Week by Discovery Channel that went around trying to claim that there could be this mysterious large shark lurking through the waters in kind of Louisiana area attacking people. Well, anyways, they found this shark biologist to interview.
Jonathan Davis and his team of scientists arrive at their first destination, the brackish waters of the Gulf of Mexico, just outside of Lake Bourne. They believe that if there is a monster shark entering Lake Pontchartrain, it would likely be sticking to this area, where the salty waters of the Gulf meet the fresh waters just outside of New Orleans.
Sharks are pretty amazing creatures. All of them have been found in weird places, so I'm not 100% certain that it would happen, but it could happen.
The problem was he didn't know he was being interviewed for that show, and this is what he had to say about it.
I asked a few of the crew members, including the producer, what the show was going to be about. I never got a straight answer, and the producer seemed to avoid the question. I was just told it would be combined with some other filming to make one show about Louisiana shark research.
Personally, I think this is probably the worst thing that you could do, basically using a biologist that didn't want his interview cut that way and cutting it up like that. It's not a full lie, it was basically using stuff that was said, twisting the facts around a little bit though, so I would place it far on the scale of towards a lie. For me, over the edge. I don't know. That show was in tandem with another show called Megalodon.
Talking about a giant shark. That thing is enormous. If the shark that's in the Nazi U-boat photo is in fact the same shark that's in the Shark Eye photo that was taken just after the boat attack, then that means there's been a 50-ton monster in these waters for over 70 years.
And Drake is running out of time to find it.
It's very obvious that some of the networks are testing our sliding scale, trying to figure out what we're willing to accept in a documentary. They say that's what we want, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that the whole way of doing the ratings might be flawed. Last night I was sick all night. The reason I think the whole system is flawed is that if you take some of those shows that do well in the Nielsen ratings and you put them online, then they don't do as well. And people give them a lot of thumbs down. I think that might be a better indicator of whether people like the show or not. So I wonder what the end result of all this is. Do we doubt the credibility of all shows that are saying they're giving us facts?
These are facts.
Or does it just make us doubt the credibility of those shows that are messing up their own credibility? So then what do we do as the scientists, as the filmmakers, as those that are making these films? Probably could never go as far as having a boycott. It just wouldn't work. I'm gonna bring this back to myself. I'm a host, I tell stories, I do science on TV. I've worked with almost all of the networks right at the moment, but it's not as easy as you might think to decide who you work with, because when you pitch a story, you pitch it to everyone. Whoever decides they like your story and is willing to fund a project, then that's who you go with. So it's not so simple. But what I'd like to do, I'd like to ask you all now what you think the solution is. Gosh, it's so windy. Sorry about that. Where on this sliding scale do we cross the line? Obviously, when you're telling a story, I think it's okay to add a little bit of drama, as long as it's not too much. I mean, you take River Monsters, they do a pretty good job with that. But we as filmmakers, we as scientists, we people in the networks need to be held accountable for their actions. Lying is not okay, obviously. But this is a question for you all. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching.
You are allowed to shoot certain things to tell a story, to prove a point, but you're not allowed to make up stories, like completely out of the blue, and tell them as if they were real. I think that's where I draw the line.
Obviously, that's a huge bag of worms to open, and I'm not gonna actually open that up for discussion, but when I make videos, I always open up for discussion to have people comment below. Am I on, by the way? Yep. Okay, yeah. I had turned it off halfway through. You are the only people who are going to be able to see that, by the way. My agent called me up when I posted it and told me to take it down. She said, nobody will hire you again if you leave that up there. It's like, well, okay, so that's where we are with media right now. The point is, we as researchers, I think we need to be the ones telling people what to believe, not people who grew up in Hollywood, because most of Discovery, National Geographic, even Science Channel, all those, they're basically giving all the contracts to people in LA. Although I'm trying to have a couple words and get them to have me do that. So we're going to be doing the rest of this little presentation. I want to just give you some solid tips that you can take with you, kind of thinking about science communication. Again, it's not going to be how I do most of my presentations, where I try to teach people to do the filmmaking. For you guys, I want to kind of switch the angle around and more or less give you this appreciation for what the media is doing, what people in science communication are doing as well. So, okay, on that note, I usually teach people how to do interviews. In this case, you guys are the ones that are going to be interviewed. Now, this is actually where I do want to show hands. I'm very curious. How many people have already had time on the media that have been interviewed by people on camera? Yeah, okay. Well, it's like a little more than half. That's pretty good. So the more you do it, obviously you're going to get better and better at it. I think that besides giving you kind of the basic tips, which are you want full sentences, you want to look at the person, not look all over the room, stuff like that, I think it's important that you understand what this person who has the camera is trying to get out of you. And really what it is it's a couple things. One, they're trying to figure out the story themselves. They might have roughly written something down. You'll spend an hour with them, and it's really important that you make sure that they understand the important bits, because they're going to then take that and spin it into a story. They might not use all of what you say. You might spend a minute talking about your cool salamander research, but the only thing that makes it is the part where you're like, I love salamanders, right? Because that's what everybody likes. They like the part where you show emotion. Also, for the videos that I do, I look for people that have emotion and give me nice short sound bits, like one sentence or so. And don't ever be worried that you're not getting enough in there, even though you spent so long with these people, because that's just how it works. And just to give you an example, Roland Case, who works at the museum, and I sat down for about 6 hours with the Science Channel, and we got about 15 seconds of airtime. This is what ended up resulting from it.
The first thing I thought when I saw this satellite view of the Red Lake in Baghdad, it would have to be millions and millions and millions of people.
But you can do the math, you can figure it out. 9 million gallons. That would be the blood of 7 million people.
They did cut out my point where I said it's definitely not people, it's probably a cyanobacteria or something like that. They cut that out, but whatever. So if you're then going to go on and you're going to produce some of your own content, or maybe like collaborate with people who are producing their own content about your research, here's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, the most important thing to think about at the beginning is who's your audience. I mean, are you going to be showing your video here at the All Researchers meeting, or are you going to be showing it to middle school kids? Are you going to be showing it to your parents? I mean, every single one of those is a different demographic, and it's going to depend on how you do the rest of your film. So I always work my way backwards from the audience backwards. And of course, it's really important how they're going to be watching. Are they watching it on a 5-inch screen, a 42-inch screen, or a 72-foot screen, in the movie theaters? Even if you're not doing all the video stuff, and it does change the way you shoot things, because it's just you need things bigger, framed wise, on a little screen than on a big screen. You just have to keep that in mind, because it also depends on the pacing. All that kind of stuff is really important. Okay, one of the biggest advice that I always give producers or anybody who's starting out is I tell them keep it real. And really, I suppose it's not keep it real, because I know the reality of research is we do a lot of time in front of the desk, and that's not what I want to do. I want to put everybody in the best light possible. And what I find is that even a lot of experienced filmmakers, they like to set everything up. They treat scientists like they're actors. And so they say, okay, we want you to come in and we want you to shake hands and greet each other and say hello, and then go out, walk down this aisle. And if it's things that we already do, then it's okay. I do a lot of this for a living, and I'm not an actor, and I'm like maybe just passable. But scientists aren't, it ends up looking stiff. And we want scientists to have the enthusiasm and the emotions that they already have be seen on camera. And the best way to do that is to keep the camera running as much as possible and catch everything as it's happening. So that's what I mean by keeping it real. And I'm going to show you one more video at the very end where hopefully you can see how I do this. Also, you need to think about the message. When somebody watches a video, they're going to go away with one thing, and that's about it. So when you ask them, what'd you learn from that documentary? You know, if you're doing a video on salamanders and the importance of habitat for salamanders, you want them to say, well, I learned that protecting the habitat, that's the most important thing for protecting salamanders, or whatever it is. But you got to have that in your head the whole way through. And you say it at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Make it really clear. Okay, when it comes to storytelling, there are a lot of different ways to tell stories. I think just having an understanding that there are different ways and for different audiences is really important. March of the Penguins, I'm guessing a lot of you had seen it. If not, it's a very classic blue chip film. I'm not exactly sure why they call it blue chip film, but it's a term used in our industry to kind of describe classic animal behavior videos, high production value, very expensive, usually without any humans, often anthropomorphized. I don't know why they have to do that, but and on the contrast, there's kind of this new YouTube vloggy style, video blogging style, where it's fast cutting, often jump cuts. A lot of times the presenters are talking really fast, and I think that works for today's youth, partly because that's what they're growing up watching, and partly because they're watching it on a different medium. They're not sitting in a movie theater. Now, I'm not going to give you any of the tips on making video that I usually give, because I think if you want to get into this, the best thing that you can do is subscribe to my YouTube channel. No, actually, I present this because I do have one YouTube channel called Rob and Jonas's Filmmaking Tips, which is only tips to make better video, and we have new videos every Tuesday. I just released one today before the meeting started. And then the last thing that I want to say is that everybody overlooks sound. It's almost something that's kind of a joke in the industry that we can fix sound later or whatever, but because a lot of you might be new to this and you haven't even started, I'm just going to tell you now, do sound as much as you do the video. So this is my sound device, this is my video device. You see, this one's bigger. I'm trying to follow that rule too. So anyways, it's super important because it's the difference between somebody looking at it and being like, oh, that's a home movie, or wow, that was actually kind of an artsy video, but very cool, because it had good audio. So, okay, what I'm going to do now, before we leave here, I do want to show one actual video where I follow some researchers. It's a shorter one, it's 4 or 5 minutes long. And this is actually kind of something that I'm doing with both. I started out with the museum in Raleigh. It's with Cal Academy right now because Michelle Trotwine, who used to be there, is now with Cal Academy. And it's looking at bugs in people's homes. I think it's really fun. I think you'll learn something. I also want you to kind of try to take some mental notes of some of the things that I'm doing that are different, maybe some of the things that are different than PBS documentaries you're used to seeing. And then I'll fill you in on what a couple of those are at the end.
So if you've watched the rest of this series, you probably already realized that you're not alone in your house. But what if you're like, hey, I have an immaculately clean house. I clean, I disinfect, I scrub, and I don't see any bugs. Well, if that's you, I'm here to tell you that you have an invisible diversity of arthropods and microbes living with you every day. But don't fret, these are good things to have in your house.
The bugs of your home.
Bugs of your house!
Now, I'm part of a global study to research bugs in homes.
Our houses, our bodies are actually relatively unexplored ecosystems. We just want to get this global perspective of the types of species that live in houses.
I followed Michelle and Misha to San Francisco, the Peruvian Amazon, and now we're here in Sweden. So today, Jonas is going to be our tour guide.
Tour guide, yeah. This is Turkish pepper.
Enjoyment? Okay. Whoa!
They are terrible candies. While we're here to study arthropods, well, the study wouldn't be complete without learning first about Sweden. And who better to show it than my partner in crime, Jonas, who was born and raised right here.
The islands and the shoreline here is very rocky. You have these little islands that people live on all year round. The O with 2 dots is Yeah, those are hard words to start with. Means island. It's just that letter.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, with 2 dots over it. That means island.
It's the last letter of the alphabet, but it also means island.
It looks like a little island. Björka.
Important words to know since our first homes are right here on the island of birch trees, Björka. And like the other countries, we're picking 6 homes, all with different styles, but all uniquely Swedish. I think it'll be really fun to introduce some of these people whose houses we're going to the invisible diversity that's all around them. And I'm kind of curious what they're going to say.
People here in Sweden do seem pretty aware of the bugs they see in their homes.
They live there and they have the place there, and they are very cute. I think they are cute.
But besides the critters that we actually see crawling around or dead on windowsills, here are 3 things that you may never know you're living with.
First, our homes are full of dust mites.
Dust mites. So mites are the most ecologically diverse group of arthropods. Though there are over 50,000 described species, there are likely more than 1 million, most undiscovered.
There is a lot in every home, and it's natural, but we have it in the carpet, probably in the pillows,
in the beds.
In the beds, they feed on old skin particles.
So a lot of what dust is dead human skin cells. That they're free-living mites despite coming from a parasitic lineage.
We're hoping to have a lot of dust mites in this little mesh bag right now. I'm gonna close it up so they don't escape.
Oh, nice catch. I'm sure there's some in here.
We don't have that many carpets. I'm allergic to mite. I know that they are all around me all the time. And they sleep in my bed, and they eat my dead parts, and they poo all over the place.
Have you seen a dust mite under a microscope?
Oh,
it's really cool. But I mean,
maybe it's a new world.
Yeah, they're so bizarre looking, and knowing that they're everywhere just blows my mind. Second, microbes are literally everywhere.
Microbiologists estimate that there are hundreds of millions of species, the majority of which we know nothing about.
Swiping for microbes.
Every home has them, but you can't see them.
And get this, over 50% of the cells in and on your body are foreign. They're microbes. A recent study of over 1,000 houses found that TV screens had more diversity than toilet seats. And toilet seat microbes were actually most similar to pillowcase microbes. How crazy is that?
Finally, there's almost 100% chance you have lice.
Book lice are tiny insects that almost certainly live in your house. We find book lice in nearly every house we sample, and so far it seems like they're much more prevalent than we even expected.
Got a book louse, it's a singular one, so...
They feed on the glue that holds a book together.
And to understand book lice, you need to realize that they are ancient nest dwellers. They have their evolutionary origins in the nests of birds and other mammals. And now they're specially well adapted to live in our homes, in our modern human nests.
Book lice are super tiny. They're usually running across the ground. It's thrilling to find them, even though you know that they're everywhere, because it's like almost like a Where's Waldo in a house. They're not good jumpers, which is fortunate because they're already so difficult to find. It would be awful if it was easy for them to get away. But once I see one, it's mine.
So just remember, we're not alone in our houses. Not only are they full of relatively large arthropods, but teeny tiny microbes and little critters barely visible to the human eye. No need to worry though, this invisible diversity is just one part of the diversity we live with that makes our world so amazingly interesting.
The bugs of your home.
That's some of the things that I did is, one, I was trying to show Dr. Misha Leong there in a really good light. I wanted people to see her for who she really was, which is this really fun scientist. You know, a lot of the ways people portray scientists, they get them sitting in a chair, they look off camera, they maybe cross their arms, and they talk with a lab coat. And they talk all about all of the facts about bugs. But I tried not to do that. I showed Misha waking up in the morning, collecting bugs, riding in the car, and that's because I had GoPros all over the car, and it just kept the camera running, and I was able to get all that fun stuff. Eventually, you know, everybody loosens up a little bit, because you can't be worried about the camera all the time. So, yeah, we're wrapping up here. You know, we're talking about communication of science. That's my Twitter handle, @UntamedScience. I don't know how many people here use Twitter. There's always half the room that's like, I will never get on Twitter. But if you are, I took a little picture and I tweeted it halfway through the conference. You should favorite it, maybe retweet it. If you do, I will go on and follow you back, so that for those of you who are into this kind of thing, I know who you are and I can follow what you're doing as well. So what's the take-home message? Well, I hope you have, to some degree, a little bit of a better appreciation for science communication. Maybe you want to make it the second thing that you're really good at. Maybe you just want to collaborate with people who are really good at it. But you know, it is something that influences people heavily. maybe even more so than the scientific publications that we're doing now for our publicizing or publication part. And for those of you who do want to take up doing a little more video work, everybody always asks me, how do you get started? You know, how do you even like get into a field like this? And the nice thing is that, you know, the phone's in our pocket, little cameras like this, video is all around us. We have the tools, so it's not like that's a limiter. Really, you got to make your first terrible video. So you got to just start. It doesn't matter how you do it, just start. And you can quote me on that. I tell everybody that. So, anyway, thank you for coming.